everyone. My name is Emily Lindsay, and I will be presenting on the death penalty in America. I will argue that the death penalty is not constitutional. Amendments 8, 9, and 14 will help me argue my point. The supporting case for my argument will be the case of Furman versus Georgia from 1972. There will be objections presented, and the supporting case for the objections will be Gregg versus Georgia from 1976. The Eighth Amendment states, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. According to the ACLU, the death penalty is cruel because it is an ancient form of punishment. It is unusual because America is the only Western country that practices it. The 14th Amendment states, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. The death penalty very clearly abridges a person's right to life, which makes it unconstitutional. Some will argue that when the person chose to become a criminal, they chose to lose this right. But that is not a viable argument. Even criminals continue to hold rights. The Ninth Amendment says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. This amendment says that there are rights that should not be construed in a way that would abridge the rights of any other person. In this context of the death penalty, we take this constitutional statement, specifically the statements of Amendment 14, and construe it in a way that allows us to justify capital punishment. The supporting case for my argument is that of Furman versus Georgia, decided in 1972. The petitioners were given the death penalty after being convicted of murder and rape. They appealed this conviction based on the 8th and 14th Amendments. The question that came before the Supreme Court was, does the death penalty constitute cruel and unusual punishment, therefore violating the 8th and 14th Amendments? The court decided that the death penalty was unconstitutional by the reasoning of these amendments, and the capital punishment sentence was revoked. The cases were sent back to the lower courts to be reevaluated for sentencing. The first argument in favor of the death penalty is this: the death penalty deters others from committing heinous crimes. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, the essence of the theory is that the threat of being executed in the future will be sufficient to cause a significant number of people to refrain from committing a heinous crime they had otherwise planned. Justia recognized the fact that the Supreme Court emphasized the role of capital punishment in deterring a crime from and providing retribution. My response to this objection is this: there is no proven link between the death penalty and the effective deterrence of heinous crimes. Many states that still have the death penalty as a viable punishment do not carry out any executions in a given year. Many states have rejected the use of the death penalty due to its lack of effectiveness. These 3 points also come from the Death Penalty Information Center. The Supreme Court has both accepted and rejected the use of the death penalty, as seen in Furman versus Georgia and Gregg versus Georgia. The second objection to my argument is this: a person has to go through the proper legal processes before receiving the death penalty. With due process, the death penalty is constitutional. Theoretically, if a person that has been accused of a crime goes through the entire process of the law and the final sentence is the death penalty, then it is constitutional. My response to this is that due process is a continuous process. The chance for changes in case evidence or laws that pertain to the case is constant. The death penalty is the most final kind of punishment that can be imposed on a person. It cannot be taken back or changed, even if there is a reason to do so. Given the mentioned facts, due process is violated when a person is sentenced to death after being formally convicted of their crimes. The last argument in favor of the death penalty is this: the article by Justia says, when reviewing an Eighth Amendment challenge, a court must decide whether a punishment is cruel or unusual according to evolving standards of decency in the community. In other words, if a society finds the death penalty to be an acceptable form of punishment, then it is not unconstitutional. My response to objection 3 is this. The society we live in believes that taking the life of another human is wrong in and of itself. Our society also believes that it is acceptable to kill a person if that person has committed a heinous crime and gone through the proper legal processes. This shows a severe contradiction in societal beliefs. This contradiction and these inconsistencies invalidates this argument. The supporting case that is in favor of the death penalty is Gregg versus Georgia, that was decided in 1976. The defendant of this case had been convicted of murder. The question that was brought to the Supreme Court is this: is the death penalty constitutional? After examining the 8th and 14th Amendments, the Supreme Court decided that the death penalty was not a violation of those amendments. Therefore, it was not a violation of the Constitution. The decision of the Georgia Supreme Court was upheld. In conclusion, Constitutional Amendments 8, 9, and 14 give sufficient evidence that points to the unconstitutionality of the death penalty. Furman versus Georgia supports the argument against the death penalty. Deterrence is an argument in favor of the death penalty. It has not been proven that the death penalty prevents heinous crimes. The death penalty is constitutional because due process has been followed. However, due process is continuous, so this argument is not sufficient. The perspective of society is reasonable justification for the death penalty. The perspective of society contradicts itself. Therefore, these inconsistencies make this argument invalid. Gregg versus Georgia supports the argument in favor of the death penalty. The United States Department of Justice writes, despite reforms, ensuring impartiality in the imposition of the death penalty remains difficult, and the costs of capital trial and appeal procedures are great. There is much more that can be said about the death penalty, but the previous arguments are a sufficient start to refuting the death penalty in America. Thank you.